All right, old friends, new friends, and everybody else, what is going on? Welcome to another episode of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo Sports Talk and more. My name is Patrick Moran. Thank you to everyone out there, as always, for listening to the show, for watching, however you consume Talking Buffalo. I very much appreciate you. I also appreciate today's sponsors, Sunny Reds, 1841 Aber Road, just down the way from Highmark Stadium, and of course, Imperial Pizza as well, 1035 Aber Road. Two locations, my favorite one right in the heart of South Buffalo. All right, yesterday we talked Buffalo Sabres the entire show with Chris Ostrander. Today I should say, we are back to Buffalo Bills talk. As usual here, midweek episode, and I'm joined by my buddy, Matt Warren, from SB Nation. This is going to be a hodgepodge kind of episode of Talking Buffalo today because there's a lot of things going on, and we're going to get to as much as we possibly can, man. What's going on, dude? How you doing?
Good. We finally had some nice weather this weekend. I was able to get out to the patio at Brightsmith Brewing. Not an ad, not a sponsor, but was able to get out there for a little bit on Saturday and get in the kayaks and stuff like that. So it was a good weekend.
You piqued my interest when you said Brightsmith, and I'll tell you real quick. I'm going to ask you why. Have you ever had their chicken sandwich? I've never had it. I've heard incredible things about it. I've never been there at all, let alone ate there. Did you eat when you were there?
We did. We got the wings. They have their they don't have 15 sauces. They have just their one sauce. It was sort of like the Bar-Bill Cajun honey butter barbecue. Not quite as sweet as that, but it had like that Cajun spice and heat instead of buffalo heat. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so those were tasty. It's a nice little patio there. I've been there when it was in the winter too, when it was just inside, and it can get loud in there, like a lot of those places that have all the industrial stuff. But it's been hopping every time I've been there. So nice.
I got to get there. I got to go to Brightsmith. I got to try it out. I've heard too many people whose food takes that I respect talk that place up.
They were good wings. I like them. Yeah.
All right, cool, man. I got to get there. All right, so we're going to do a lot today. We're going in not a lot of time as well. Originally, and we're still going to get to this, we were going to spend time, and we're going to talking about not this offseason, which just gets more eventful by the day, including today as we're recording this. We're going to take a look back to last offseason, which obviously a full year ago. I feel like after a full year and the season's played, you can really kind of go back and review. And we're going to go back and take a look and kind of review the 2024 offseason for the Buffalo Bills. So we're going to get to that in a little bit as well. I'm going to preface this, whether you are new to the show or whether you listen every week to Matt and I. Typically, we record around 11 a.m. on Tuesdays for a Wednesday podcast drop, and we do that because of our schedules. It's just what's works for both of us. Today's a little bit different. We're a good full hour behind because we've been kind of tracking what's going on at One Bills Drive here this Tuesday morning. Mandatory minicamp has started. We're recording right before they practice, but Sean McDermott is literally just now starting to wrap up with the media. And there's some news, a lot of news coming out of today, a lot of developments, some small, one pretty damn big. I just got a look from you. Did I miss something here?
I just saw that Sal said Deion Walker has gone from no reps to 4 to 5 reps and will continue to ramp up. So that's good news.
That is definitely good news.
We'll talk more about that later.
Yeah. He was expecting to be brought along slowly. So anything he's doing is good. All right, let's get right to the big stuff here.
Yes.
As we record this, James Cook is in Buffalo. James Cook has reported. Sean McDermott confirmed James Cook is in the building. And as we record this anyway, said as far as he knows, intends on practicing this week. To what extent? I'm sure we'll find out in the next day or two from various Bills beat reporters that are there covering it. I kind of had, before this went down, it was kind of like a who's going to blink first between Cook and Bills discussion plan with you, which I think we could still kind of get into a little bit, but this is a development. I did warn on social media, and I'll say the same thing here again on this show. I don't want to be the fun police here, Matt, but I wasn't all that concerned about James Cook not being in Buffalo for minicamp. I'm not going to get too excited about him being here either. It is a good step, all right? There's no denying that. But what is he doing? Is he holding in right now? We don't know how much work is he going to put in. What's the situation? What's the relationship between the team and the player behind closed doors? Not what they're saying publicly. These are still things that we don't know, so I'm not going to get too excited. But above all else, especially considering Adam Schefter just reported a handful of days ago to not expect James Cook in Buffalo anytime soon, for him to be here and at the very least, report to practice, surely, so he's not going to get fined, of course. What are your initial thoughts here as we're dealing with this, kind of as we're recording this in real time?
Yeah, there's a handful of NFL players who did skip mandatory minicamps around the NFL. Yep. Nobody in Buffalo, thankfully. I was anticipating him not being here for minicamp, but I also, from the very beginning, said I didn't think it was going to matter too much other than whatever it was, like $104,000 that he was going to get fined for missing minicamp. The whole goal of doing the minicamp holdout is to send a message. And I'm pretty sure that message has been sent from James Cook's camp over and over again to the Buffalo Bills that he wants a deal. I don't think it moves the needle in either direction. Like, oh, they must be really close to a deal. I don't think that is the case in this particular, scenario. So like you said, I don't know if it shows me like anything like as far as like the long-term implications of James Cook being in Buffalo. I do think it shows that he's planning on being in Buffalo for training camp in the regular season, which I never suspected he wasn't going to be anyway. So again, I'm a little bit wet blanket about it.
I'm not there with you. In terms of, I'd be lying to you if I sat here and said I have fully expected him to be here for training camp and for the season. I think all right, how do I say this? Because I don't want to sound like I'm trying to report on sources that aren't there. I'm just going to say I've had a feeling for a hot minute now that James Cook could try to force a trade. I've felt that way. I'll just leave it at that for now. Before we circle back to Cook, too, some actual news. The Bills did sign a linebacker on Tuesday, a veteran linebacker, Shaq Thompson, yet another Bills-Carolina connection.
We thought we were done.
We're never going to be done with that. So we'll talk about that a little bit today, and also some other non-James Cook kind of news in terms of this week's minicamp. There is a pretty lengthy list of players. Everybody's there. All right, I want to point that out. Sean McDermott said everybody has reported. Everybody's in the house. There is a handful of players that are not practicing because they're banged up. Most of them, we don't know exactly what it is, but KJ Hamler, Cam Lewis, Taron Johnson, Cole Bishop, DeMar Hamlin, Joey Bosa, Balen Spector, shockingly, Connor McGovern, all of them are not practicing. At least today on Tuesday, they're not practicing. Sean McDermott did say that as things stand right now, and things could change, but he doesn't expect any of these injuries to be an issue with training camp. So he expects everyone to be good to go for training camp. In terms of what the specific injuries are, we know a couple of them. We know Joey Bosa's got the calf. Taron Johnson's still recovering from torn labrum surgery. I saw a report last week that DeMar Hamlin was in a walking boot. So I'm not quite sure what it is, but something with the lower body there. Other guys, not sure about. But anyway, worth noting that those guys are not practicing, but it certainly doesn't seem to be anything crazy significant to worry about from what Sean McDermott is saying. All right, so back to James Cook here. He's here. He's in Buffalo. He reports. I'm really staying even keel about it because I'd like to see how much, you know what? If we were recording this 4 hours from now and James Cook is a full participant in practice and he's taking first team reps and doing all the drills, I'm going to feel really good. If James Cook's there and he's holding in or barely, he takes a rep or two and now he's got which kind of hold-in move is, a little hamstring pull or something like that, then I'm going to kind of temper the excitement a little bit. Do you feel to some extent, now today notwithstanding, because again, him being here, today being Tuesday, Cook being in camp, it's a good thing. Any way you look at it, him being here in camp is a good thing. Let's be clear about that. I have felt like these, between the Bills and Cook, it's felt to me like they're headed towards a game of chicken. Like, who's going to blink first? Have you gotten that sense? Because the perception is the Bills hold all the cards. I don't know that I quite buy that, though. What's your thought right now in terms of this and where it's been and where you think it might be going?
Well, the way that the Bills wouldn't hold all the cards is if there was somebody that was willing to trade for James Cook and pay him a significant contract higher than the Bills would do. And I just don't know if there's a ton of that out there at this point in the NFL offseason. So I do think the Bills, if they don't hold all the cards, they hold most of the deck, and so like they have the CBA on their side, they have the time of year on their side. They have everything stacked for them. The CBA makes it really hard for a player to hold out in training camp and definitely into the season. The fines are pretty massive for somebody that's complaining about, the difference in, I don't know how much the Bills have offered James Cook to sign, if they've offered him anything, but like, for somebody that's complaining about, salaries and stuff like that, he loses like $1 million if he holds out of all of training camp, which is a lot of money, so, obviously, I mean, goes without saying, $1 million is a lot of money. But like, and then there's also the whole, like, if he wants the accrued season, he has to show up, by a certain date to make sure that he can, have his contract, accrue the season so that he can get free agency next year. So, I mean, it just the way that the contracts and the CBA are set up is that the Bills hold the vast majority of the cards, and all James Cook can do is, excuse me, have, an undiagnosable by an outside person injury, like a tweaked hamstring, like, a little bit of a strained calf, something like that, and, sit out training camp. But ultimately, I think he needs to play in order to up his value to that $15 million a year salary that he wants. He played less. We've talked about this before. He's played less than 50% of the snaps. So yeah, he's been really effective when Josh Allen is his quarterback. He has one of the top offensive lines in the NFL, and he's playing less than 50% of the snaps. But can he carry an NFL team, which is what he's going to be asked to do if he's making $15 million a year? So I do think the Bills hold almost all of the cards.
Maybe almost all. I've said this before. We've talked about this. You and I have talked about it. Other people too on this show. Last year, seeing Hassan Reddick scares me.
Yeah.
It scares me. So when I say that I don't necessarily think the Bills hold all the cards, maybe in a way they do, but James Cook could still influence the deck. And I think back to last year with Hassan Reddick and him not playing as long as he did. And then when he did, he mailed it in. He was such an ineffective, non-relevant player for the Jets. And what scares me is that despite all that, you can question his character, his motives, everything you want to question. He still went out and got a good, big 1-year contract, 2 minutes in the free agency. Tampa Bay paid him anyway. James Cook, can he do that? I don't know. I'm just saying that's fair or not to James. Maybe it's not even fair to James Cook, but just in the back of my mind, I just keep going back to Hassan Reddick and what he did with the New York Jets last year. Now, you bring up a great point, too, because like Jonnu Smith, TJ Watt, there are good players out there right now who have not reported. Trey Hendrickson, that are not reported to camp, and Cook is. I don't know.
All those players that you mentioned, especially Hassan Reddick, have significant cash reserves, as a person, right? Like Hassan Reddick had made $51 million before he held out from the Jets last year. Like, it's not necessarily the same thing as, James Cook throwing $1 million, towards NFL training camp fines. So like, and Reddick was really unique. I'm still shocked that Reddick gave away as much money as he did. It didn't really make sense to me for him to be giving up literally millions of dollars every single week to sit out. So yeah, he did sign, a decent contract this offseason. That was $14 million. Yeah. Which he held out last year because he was only making 16. So I don't necessarily know if he got what he wanted from that holdout either. And so but Trey Hendrickson's, on his, multiple contracts, Jonnu Smith's on multiple contracts. So you're talking about guys that have been around, that have money in the bank. With James Cook, I'm not saying he doesn't have money in the bank, but he's not in the, $20 million, $30 million range like those other guys.
He's never made $3 million in a season before.
Yes.
He will this year, or he's scheduled to anyway. He's scheduled to make 5 point something million this year in the last year of his rookie contract. So it's a very valid point. And look, going back to James, I am not saying 100% that he doesn't want to be here. I'm not saying he's going to force a trade if he doesn't get what he wants here. I'm not saying that's going to be the case. Hopefully, for both sides, it would be best. I mean, logically, it's not really a debate. Logically, it just feels go out there, ball out, have a great year again, and somebody, if it's not going to be the Bills, somebody's going to pay you. That's great for James Cook. For the Buffalo Bills, if he goes out and he balls out, first of all, most importantly, let's throw the money in the garbage for a second. What's most important is that James Cook is he helps make the Buffalo Bills a better football team. They're better with James Cook on the field than with him off the field. That's not debatable to me. And anyone who says otherwise is an idiot out there, okay? I'm just going to say that. You're an idiot out there if you say, I don't need James. I don't care about James Cook. Ray Davis is just as good. Ty Johnson's just as good. No, they're not. Period. End of story. And I will die on that hill. Getting the football side stuff aside, that's the most important thing. But from the Bills' perspective, your boy walks away. Hey, man, we're going to get ourselves a third-round comp pick, maybe a fourth, absolute worst. But you're going to get a mid-round pick, which is probably, if you were to trade him tomorrow, that's the best you're going to get for him right now anyway. Right?
Yeah, that's the argument, I think, against trading him right now, is that you can use him for a year and still get that return, on the back end of it. Here's the comp. Daniel Jones, $14 million this offseason, going to result in a fourth-round compensatory pick for the Vikings a year from now. So $14 million is around that for fourth-round pick region. And so, is somebody going to trade a third-round pick for James Cook and then give him $15 million a year? I highly doubt it.
I agree with you 100%. Here's my biggest concern. And you know what? Maybe this is the wrong day and the wrong episode, and I'm going to get flamed by a lot of people who are listening and watching this. And I'm going to be honest with you. I would understand. Flame away at me. Maybe because I'm saying this today, it's deserved. He's here. He's at minicamp right now. And I'm still talking about trades and him trying to force his way out. Okay. Let's say, worst case, he wants a trade. The Bills don't do it. This is what I'm concerned about. This is a championship caliber football team, and I still feel that way. What's the one thing besides injuries that could really derail a championship caliber football team? For me, it's distractions. I'm already kind of lukewarm, hot and cold about HBO Hard Knocks being here because of some potential distractions it could cause. Is this not potentially an ultimate distraction? Let's say at worst he wants to be traded, but the Bills won't trade him because of what we just talked about. Brandon Beane's why am I going to go get a fourth or fifth round pick for you when I could go get a third or fourth round comp pick when you go get paid next year? Why would I want to trade you? I'm not going to do that. That could be Brandon Beane's stance. James Cook's stance could be, and I'm not saying it's going to be, and I'm not saying he's that type of guy, but it could feasibly be, well, F you then. I'm going to make life really not pleasant for you right now. You know what I mean? I am going to hold in. Or whatever. I am going to give you less than my best because all I care about right now is getting the free agency and getting paid by somebody next year. And again, I want to emphasize this. I am not saying he's going to do that. I don't even expect him to do that. I'm just saying potentially it's on the table, and that's where I still am kind of littered with some concern. He could become a distraction off the field. That scares me a little bit.
The Bills have dealt with distractions before, obviously. I mean, they had Stephon Diggs in their locker room for, multiple seasons where, who knows what was going on behind the scenes. I mean, he missed mandatory minicamp, if you remember, and they were able to gloss over that at least for one more year from Stephon Diggs. And so they've dealt with the ego thing before. They've dealt with whether it's, I want the ball more, I want a bigger role in the offense, or I want a bigger say in the organization. They've dealt with that before. But also, Diggs didn't really go to the media. It wasn't his thing. I mean, I'm not saying it's Cook's thing either. But they're not kind of going to go find a microphone every single Sunday and be like, "See what I did? You should give me a contract." So that could happen. but they at least have experience dealing with that, internally.
Boy, am I going to get a lot of criticism for a lot of my comments
showed up
on
and
this
you
show
buried him.
today. I'm prepared for it. It's coming. I know it's coming. This is not the day to be critical of James Cook on the day that he reports to camp. I completely understand that. Let me ask you one more question about James for today. Next week, we should hopefully have some clarification. Plus, after this week, there's going to be nothing but speculation because the next time we're even supposed to see James Cook will be in late July for training camp. Can you see a reason? Obviously, you don't know. You're not in that locker room. You don't know James Cook or his entourage, his people, or anything like that. But can you see a reason outside of money why James Cook wouldn't want to be here? Is there any other reason where you could come up with where you say, hey, man, James Cook is asking for money that he knows the Bills are never going to pay him because he doesn't want to be here, and that could be some kind of excuse or something. Just do you see any non-financial reasons why James Cook would not want to stay long-term in Buffalo beyond, obviously, this year, but beyond this year?
If we look at like the traditional reasons players don't want to be there, it's not a winning culture. Obviously, the Bills have a winning culture. Not a successful offense or not a successful offensive line. The Bills have both of those things. Like you start to whittle away all of the reasons really quickly, I think, when you look at the traditional reasons players want to get out. So
Right.
The only thing I can think of is if he's really hell-bent on being that number one running back 3-down guy, and the Bills have shown that they're not willing to do that over the last few years. If he's really hell-bent on being out there every single down, that could be the sticking point. That could be like, I can't spread my wings here because you won't let me play on third downs, you won't let me play in the 2-minute drill. But I do think that ultimately does come back to the money aspect anyway, because if you want to get paid, what the top dogs are getting paid, you have to play more than 50% of the snaps. So it really is that kind of vicious cycle. But that's the only sticking point I could see with James Cook is he wants to be an every down guy, and the Bills are not letting him do that.
There are instances where there's also, and again, I can't emphasize this enough. I'm not saying James Cook's that dude, man, but there's some guys who don't like the weather. That's a factor. They'd rather live in the South or in the West where it's warmer. James Cook's from Florida, so I ain't gonna lie. I've thought about that. And then there's other people who think, remember Wilson McGahee? Buffalo's boring, man. It's not a fun, lively town. That said, everything that I've heard or learned about James Cook is he's not really that dude anyway. He's more of a kind of a quiet, almost homebody type thing, which is a good thing. You know what I mean? It's kind of like a Buffalo thing. And I might look at it. I'm spreading controversy today. I'm criticizing a guy who actually reported to camp. Again, I'm going to get killed. I'll tell you what, I was planning on having some form of how are you feeling, if James wasn't here today, or how are you feeling right now about the Ray Davis, Ty Johnson combo, because it might start looking a lot more realistic. But I feel like if we go down that rabbit hole right now, and then I'm really going to get killed. So we'll say that. Let's switch gears here. All right, so that's what's going on with James Cook. James Cook is in Buffalo. He reported on Tuesday. As we're recording this around lunchtime, Sean McDermott said he will be practicing as far as he knows. That's what Sean said at his presser as we are live recording this. The Bills did sign a linebacker on Tuesday as well, Shaq Thompson. He's 31 years old. He's, again, another Buffalo-Carolina connection that lives on. Joe from Queens, by the way, literally 2 minutes before you and I started rolling the camera here, sent me a text with a database of players who have played for the Bills and Carolina, and he wants to do an entire show on this Bills-Carolina list, and he wants to go over the list. Anyway, a starter, 2016 to 2022, he started almost all those games. He had at least 100 tackles from 2019 to 2022. Injuries the last 2 years have been the story with him. Broken leg in 2023 in just week 2. That cost him the season. And then this past year, started the first 4 games, but then he tore his Achilles. So he's coming off a broken leg 2 years ago, a torn Achilles last year. I looked at his numbers, like his advanced stats. to see if he played special teams because he ain't starting. And we keep talking about this every week. They got to care about special teams somewhere on this roster, right? Well, he's played special teams, played a lot of it early in his career, played a little bit last year as well. So I do think if he's healthy enough to play, which, by the way, he's not practicing, at least not on Tuesday anyway. They just signed him. So I don't know where he's at health-wise. This is just news to us right now, breaking before the show started. But if you're Balin Spector, this is probably not a great day for you. That was my first take. What's yours?
Yeah. I mean, my first take was that they need depth at linebacker. You and I have talked about this previously, that I was surprised that they didn't add anyone in the draft. And this comes on the heels of not adding really anyone in free agency. So like this at least answers that question of, I mean, maybe they've had this plan all along that they were going to sign him, right before minicamp. The Achilles injury during, was it November or something last year? And so like, he's probably not going to be full speed for a while. If he ever gets back there, he's 31, whatever. So, it's even more riskier than the Joey Bosa signing, in my opinion, because like there's no way he's fully 100% right now, whereas Bosa was at least close to 100% when they signed him. So it's a risky signing right now, but it could really work out for them. And yeah, to your point, he did play 20% of the special team snaps in the 4 games he was in last year, 20% of the special team snaps in 2022. So he's done that before. Even back when he was starting, 14 games back, 2018, 2019, he was playing a significant number of special team snaps for the Panthers. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if, they were really signing him for all of those purposes right now.
My gut instinct was to disagree with you about the risk thing because I don't really think the expectation for him is anything more than a backup guy. But to your point, which does make this a little bit riskier, the Bills should have did something before June 10th in signing Shaq Thompson. So I feel like they took a risk also by not drafting a linebacker and not really being active in that market and kind of going with what they had. So it's risky that you are relying on Shaq Thompson to provide some potential quality depth at inside linebacker as well as special teams and be better and healthier than Balin Spector. So from that aspect, I would definitely say, sure, it is a risk. Let's take a quick break, come back. I got a Sean McDermott question for you that we talked about on the show a couple days ago, and then we'll kind of fly through last year's offseason and evaluate how the Bills did. Be right back, folks. All right, back here with Matt Warren from SB Nation. I got to tell you something. Experience is key when you do a podcast. And here's what I mean. The first 20 minutes of this show has been so helter-skelter because typically you and I have a really nice outline together. We have time to prepare. We talk in the morning. Nothing really happens on Tuesdays. We know what direction we're going in, and it's kind of easy, free-flowing. Shit was a mess, because of the James Cook thing that's happening. Sean McDermott's talking to the media while we're literally recording right now. There's players that are missing because of injury, and I had a couple controversial takes, and I think in the past I would have gotten completely rattled, and this show would have totally went off the rails. But still a little bit composed, a little bit calm, man. I'm like, whatever, shit happens. One of these episodes is sometimes you're going to say the unpopular thing, and things don't go as planned. You got an outline, but then news breaks and stuff like that. So we're all good here on Talking Buffalo today. With my guy, Matt Warren. Let me ask you this real quick before we get into last year's offseason. On Sunday's show, I had Joe from Queens with me, and one of the primary topics was about Sean McDermott. I'm a big New York Knicks fan. Last week, Tibbs got fired, Tom Thibodeau, despite the fact that the Knicks reached the Eastern Conference Final for the first time in 25 years. The Knicks have won at least 50 regular season games in back-to-back years for the first time since the early 90s. They've won a first round of a playoffs in 3 straight years for the first time in many, many, many years. They got their respect back. They're a good team, one of the best teams in the conference. They almost made it to the championship. Fluke-ass game 1, whatever, but maybe they still lose that series anyway. I don't want to get off track here. My point was this. Despite all that success, the Knicks still fired Tibbs. And they concluded This coach did a good job. He brought us back to respectability. We sucked before he got here. He changed the culture. We did a lot of good things. However, he has taken us as far as we're going to go. It got me thinking about Sean McDermott naturally here. We covered the Bills on Talking Buffalo. Kind of mirrors that a little bit in a way. Sean McDermott took over a team that had a 17-year drought. He pulled them out of the drought. The Bills have been winners. They've won 10 games at least, I think, 5, 6 straight seasons. They've won 5 straight division titles. They've won at least one playoff game 5 straight years. They've been the AFC Championship game twice now since 2020. Lots of parallels to me. And I asked Joe, I said, should there be a mandate on Sean McDermott this year? Not counting injuries, and maybe I should have prefaced that on Twitter when I put this out there because everyone kept talking about injuries. I thought it would go without saying. If Josh Allen breaks his leg, all bets are off, okay? Of course, you don't expect Andy Reid's not winning a Super Bowl, nor should he be expected to get to one if Patrick Mahomes goes out for the season. That should have went without saying. But if injuries aren't the primary factor in the Bills, say they lose in the first round of the playoffs, or maybe if they win just one game and they lose again, at what point, if he doesn't have one already, should Sean McDermott have a mandate? That's what I'm asking you now. What do you think?
I responded to you. I'm not one for like mandates and everything like that. I mean, I do think that it's interesting that, nobody's really, I don't think that Terry Pegula has the stomach for it, to be perfectly honest with you, especially with what's going on with the Sabres and how they're kind of been all over the place. Like, you've had a really successful run with Sean McDermott. They're opening this brand new stadium next year. Like, having that continuity, having that excitement, not injecting doubt into the whole thing, I think is really valuable to him right now when he has so many other things going on in his, business and personal life. So I do think that a mandate's probably the wrong way to put it. I do think at some point we have to talk about maybe the Sean McDermott defense isn't the right way to go. But I just don't see him firing Bobby Babich and bringing in I don't know, just throw out Vic Fangio or whatever. I'm just
I get what you're saying
to get what you're saying. That could be an interesting kind of sidebar. They bring in a Jim Schwartz or you know what I mean, bringing in the defensive guy to kind of change how they run their defense. But I just don't see short of maybe a Ken Dorsey promotion because Josh Allen goes to Terry Pegula and it's hey, this needs to happen. Yeah. I just don't see a scenario where the Bills move on from Sean McDermott at the end of 2025.
Joe said his only scenario where even if he said the Bills could miss the playoffs, the only way he could see Sean McDermott being fired would be if Josh Allen went to Terry and said, man, this ain't working. I'm unhappy here. And, we got to change coaches.
And
we got to do it.
Maybe I'm dull. I don't see Josh Allen doing that, but it just doesn't feel like his personality. But I mean,
oh no, I don't see it either.
If I'm Josh Allen and I put up, some of the games I've put up against the Chiefs in the playoffs, and Sean McDermott's defense has let me down the way that's happened, maybe there's enough is enough somewhere in there. But I might have already done it if I was, in his shoes.
I might have did it after 13 seconds if I was Josh Allen.
Well, yeah, there you go. Just that one.
So that was the pushback from Joe. I feel like the pushback from the people who responded beyond, again, the injury stuff is the uncertainty. All right, well, you fire Sean. Who are you replacing him with? That's part of the deal, too. Who says it's going to be better? Who says that coach is going to get you over the top? Joe made me have to point out a couple times where it did work, the Gruden Dungy thing, and just kind of said it's only happened a few times ever where it's actually worked out that way. So that's something as well.
That was 20-something years ago. There's better coaches out there. There's worse coaches out there. You could go either way on it. So, and that's another thing. With the stadium opening, like I said, just keeping it status quo, I think is probably the way to go, because unless you've got a slam dunk, sort of upgrade, I don't know who it would be. I can't even throw out that speculation. I think that it would be a bummer for fans. I really do. And so I think there's just a lot of business and off the field reasons not to even have that conversation. But I'm not the biggest McDermott fan, so it's like I'm willing to have this conversation with anybody who wants to have it.
It's you know what? It's early June and it's only mandatory minicamp. Let's have a little fun. Guys, get a fun question. Let's say if the right coach, and maybe he's not the right coach to you, but let's say a certain university in North Carolina, old aging head coach with a girl who's 50 years younger than him, was interested in being the head coach of the Buffalo Bills, and you got to fire Sean McDermott to do it. Is that something you would consider?
No.
Really? No.
No. Belichick, I mean, I do think that Belichick and Brady were, symbiotic, that like, it's not just Brady, it's not just Belichick, but we did see what happened, with Brady, with the Patriots after Belichick. And it's not to say that like Belichick is like, lost it or, anything like that. But I really do think he's a systems guy. And it would take more than a year or two for Belichick to like mold something into his system. And so I don't think he's the guy that you want to bring in to like do a one season turnaround to get a team to the next level. He's more of a like, I don't know. He's a guy that I would bring in to kind of like establish, a 4 or 5 year plan. Almost. I mean, Pete Carroll.
Like the Patriots now.
What's that?
Like with the Patriots right now with Drake May and where they're at.
Right. Yeah. But like he also kind of gets caught up in like, I mean, hubris, like a lot of those coaches do. And they think that it's their way that's going to work and no other possible way could work. And I just like, he never had a general manager supporting him. He was always like trying to take too much of that power away. Like he just didn't really ask for help when he needed it. And I mean, I don't know if we're saying that now in North Carolina or not, but with Jordan Hudson, whatever. But like, I don't think that he's the right guy to do that kind of a quick turnaround. Like we saw Pete Carroll come in with the Raiders and he's there to stabilize that organization, kind of turn them around to respectability. He's not going to be there for their Super Bowl run. Like, I don't think anybody is under that impression, but he could get them back on that path, to respectability. And so I see Belichick more in that role than a guy that's going to get them over the hump in one season or 2 seasons.
That's fair. That's very fair. If your reasoning is primarily he's old and he's a guy who's going to take a while and he's not a 1-year wonder type coach, then I can certainly respect that. For the people out there though who have said, well, Bill Belichick was only good because he had Tom Brady. It wasn't shit when he didn't have Tom Brady. Well, Bill Belichick would have Josh Allen, okay? We're not talking about trying to Mitch Trubisky taking the Bills to the Super Bowl, are we? We're talking about the best quarterback, arguably the best quarterback in football right now. So,
well, and that's what I say to people when they talk about like, well, it could be so much worse than Sean McDermott. Yeah, but you're probably going to win 8 to 10 games with Josh Allen out there, no matter who's the head coach. Like I could go be the head coach. I'd probably win 8 games with Josh Allen.
Well, I'm like, boy, am I going to take a beating on this episode. I guess my biggest question for not just you, but for anybody out there is, does it come a point where you look at yourself and you say, maybe it's even subconsciously where you're saying, I am content with the Bills being good every year. I am content with the Bills being in the mix every year. I am content with us having opportunities to knock on the door each year. Now it's been 6, 7, 8, going 9 years, however many years it ends up being, where we don't knock that door down and you lose in the divisional round, you lose in the championship game, or hell, man, maybe even losing the first round at some point. I don't know. But do you just get content with being good enough to be amongst those teams each year? Meanwhile, your MVP, all-world quarterback, this is the last year where he's still in his 20s. At this time next year, when you and I are talking, Josh Allen's going to be a 30-year-old quarterback. Not that that's very old, but still, I think that puts him in, I hate to say it, the back 9 of his career because he's only on hole 10 or 11 at that point. He's not on hole 16. You get what I'm saying, though? I think there's a portion of people, and I'm not advocating Sean McDermott should get fired. And I'm also not saying Sean McDermott can't win the Super Bowl. I'm not saying he's not the coach that could get the Bills over the hump. I still kind of, I believe in this organization, and I do believe in his team as things stand right now. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if they finally do win the Super Bowl. But my thing is that they don't, or if they don't even get to it, at what point do you start to look at yourself and just say, you know what, I am just content with the Bills being good enough to be in the mix every year?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And it's a difference between like you and me saying it and Terry Pagula saying it. Like, because ultimately that's where the power lies. And I do think that, like, when you get to so many divisional round games, so many AFC championship games, you can tell yourself, and Brandon Beane has done a really good job this offseason of telling folks, like, we're one play away, we're one decision away, we're one play away, whatever it happens to be. And I think you can really talk yourself into that. And I don't think he's wrong. I think the year that, the 13 seconds happened, like, they were probably one decision away from going to the Super Bowl and, probably winning the whole damn thing. And so it's easy to have that conversation. But then you look at like other organizations who have done it. The Packers couldn't wait to get rid of, Mike McCarthy when he was taking them to, the divisional round and conference championship game every year. And they turn it around with Matt LaFleur and pretty much get to the exact same place, just with a new guy as head coach. So, I mean, I'm not saying it would be better or worse without him. I just like, we've seen teams do it. You mentioned the Knicks, the Dallas Stars just did it. They got to 3 straight Western Conference finals, couldn't get over the hump, got rid of their coach. So I think, they're NHL's like more turnover at coaches and things like that. But
right.
So like there are like, caveats there, but like, I do think that there is a time and place for that conversation, but ultimately I just don't think it's going to happen a year from now. And we're looking at more like 2 years from now or 3 years from now, if the cycle keeps going.
Well, one thing you're definitely right about is there was a time and place for this conversation, and it probably would have a different tone with fans if we were talking about this. Let's just say they lose in the divisional round this coming season, and I hope that doesn't happen. I'm just saying, if that were to, maybe fans will feel a different type of way than they feel right now in early June, where understandably so, there's just so much optimism going on with this organization, as there should be.
And I think you probably watched the whole interview when I think it was Matt Perino was with Sean McDermott, and he asked him, like, there's no quarterback head coach combo that's won a Super Bowl after their first, 5 seasons together, if they didn't win it, into the first one or didn't get there. I can't remember what the exact stat is, but like, there's legitimate questions around that. And like, obviously Sean McDermott's hearing them because Matt Perino's asking him like to his face with a microphone. So it shouldn't be lost on anybody in that organization.
Let's spend the last 10 minutes of today's episode kind of reflecting a little bit, going back to a year ago. You recently put up an article on Buffalo Rumblings, going through a review of some of the best moves, just moves in general from last off season. It's kind of like, when you draft somebody, it takes 2 to 3 years before you can really start to evaluate. I feel like a year with an off season is when you could get a really good idea of how things went. It didn't feel like it at the time because it didn't feel like an eventful offseason. There weren't big name signings or anything like that. No major big trades, unless you count Stephon Diggs leaving the Bills last year. But it ended up being, when you really look at your list that you put out there with some details in it, and I'll put a link to that, by the way, in the show notes for everybody. It ended up being a very effective and efficient offseason for the Bills. It's kind of, we'll fly through these quickly, and we'll just go like one by one, the points that you brought up. They signed David Edwards to a 2-year deal. And I remember at the time, I'm like, I don't give a shit. This is your 6th offensive lineman. Maybe he starts this year. I don't know. Well, he did start. He started every game. Well, not counting the finale, which didn't mean anything. But played well. You wrote it, $4.678 million made last year. That's a really good bargain. That's one of the more underrated bargains on the Buffalo Bills, actually, if you stop to think about it, man. He was pretty damn good.
Well, and it's because he was the 6th offensive lineman the year before. And all of us, none of us really knew what the offensive line was going to shake out as at that point in time. They eventually move on from Mitch Morse after re-signing David Edwards, I believe. I can't remember the exact timing of it. But so we really didn't know that offensive line was going to be in flux on the interior. And it really did work out for them. And that was kind of the first domino as far as like additions or keeps. So yeah, that article that I wrote was just the guys that they either kept or added. It wasn't talking about like players that they like released or.
Yeah, right. Released, traded, lost. Next one, they kept Von Miller. They restructured his deal to keep him there. Saved, you wrote $8.6 million in cap space. How I feel about him kind of depends. He was so good early in the season. I remember, I think he had like 3 sacks in his first 4 games. He was a beast. He was starting to look like the Von Miller that, at least shades of him, that the Bills originally signed back in 2022. That suspension happened. Still had pretty decent advanced metrics after that, but the sacks kind of went. He ended up with 6 sacks in 14 games. And we've talked about this ad nauseum on this show, you and I. Just such a, well, it's hard to say non-factor because he did have the fumble recovery technically against the Ravens. But all in all, man, dude played like not even a quarter of the snaps in either the Chiefs or the Ravens game. And that's not what you make the biggest investment in franchise history to do. You know, have a guy he wasn't hurt. He was healthy enough to be out there. He was not limited or anything like that. Just for whatever reason, Sean, Bobby, they chose not to play him a lot. I don't know in hindsight if it was a good move or not.
Well, restructuring it, I think, was a net positive. Like, they were going to spend that money on defensive end. Part of it was already guaranteed to him anyway. And so he ended up taking a pay cut to get a more guaranteed money than he would have necessarily on the open market. So I think it ended up being a good move on both sides based on his regular season stats and his Johnny on the spot moment in the Ravens game, even if we really did want more out of him in that Chiefs game.
Taylor Rapp, an extension, I think it was 3 years. And I'm going to be honest with you, we've talked about this. I'm not the biggest Taylor Rapp guy. However, let me also say this. I'm much more of a Taylor Rapp guy when he's averaging about $3.5 million per year than I am a Taylor Rapp if he was getting paid $8 to $9 million or something like that per year. He is a playmaker. He does make things happen. He's prone to getting beat a little bit as well too, and taking chances and making some mistakes out there. But all in all, to have a pretty solid, although albeit a guy who's been getting banged up more than I like to see. We talk about Benford missing these games 2 straight years now. Taylor Rapp has been hurt in important parts of the season for the Buffalo Bills. 2 straight years he's missed their elimination loss. But anyway, good extension. $3.5 million per year for a pretty rock steady, solid, starting strong safety.
Yeah, exactly the kind. I mean, obviously we want everybody to play like a superstar on a mediocre contract, but certainly a solid deal for both sides, I think.
Yeah. Dion Dawkins extension. What's there really to say about that? He's a Pro Bowl caliber guy. Pretty good move at the right time, right age still.
Yeah, but he's 10th in the NFL among left tackle average money. So, I mean, for a guy that's playing at a Pro Bowl level, and that's even taking out the guys that are 2025 first round picks, all this other stuff. And so, I think they're getting great value from Dion Dawkins.
AJ Epenesa was a 2-year extension, averaging around $6 million or so per year. He got 6 sacks. It seems like I think he came out of his crib with 6 sacks. I think he's been getting 6 sacks since he was in Little Loop, man. It's 6 sacks a year, 6.5 every single year of his career. I don't know in hindsight if I would have done the same thing again. If I had the power of hindsight, I don't know that I bring him back. To me, and I've said this, I raised the bar with these guys at this point now. What you did in the regular season, he's fine. Where was he in the playoffs, man? Where was he in the playoffs? Just like, Greg Rousseau against the Chiefs. Where was AJ Epenesa when you needed him the most? You know what you're getting with these guys. You knew what you were probably getting before you signed him. I don't know. I might disagree with you a little bit on this one. I don't know that I would do this again if I had the opportunity.
Yeah. 2 things. First of all, I appreciate your honesty here about AJ Epenesa and judging folks between the regular season and postseason, because if you said that about players and didn't say the same thing about Sean McDermott earlier, you would be dishonest. And so I appreciate you being the same for both of those things. So people can come at you for your Sean McDermott stuff, but I think that bar is worth having that conversation on. Now, as far as AJ Epenesa is concerned, I remember people thinking he was severely overpaid at $6 million a year. For the number of snaps he plays and the amount of plays that he makes, I think that $6 million is a really nice number for both sides. So I think it was a good contract. To your point, were they going to sign somebody with that $6 million that would have made a bigger impact than him? I don't know. I'm a little bit skeptical on that.
Let me add a caveat too, okay? This was a 2-year contract. We've talked about this a little bit. Landon Jackson's a rookie. Joey Bosa's already hurt. Michael Hoyt is suspended for 6 games. There's still opportunity for AJ Epenesa to make this into a bargain contract in year 2. So in fairness to him, I will put that out there to the universe as well. Matt Collins. special teams guy is whatever, man. Dude led the team in touchdown catches. He had some big plays, special teams and offense. He was their best receiver in the AFC title game. I've been accused of having about 20 Matt Collins funerals on this podcast since he went to New England. Maybe this is 21 right here. This was a low-key, incredible signing for the Buffalo Bills. And as crazy as this sounds, I don't know where the Bills end up last year if they don't have Matt Collins. He had some pretty damn big moments.
I think that's fair. And I also think of all the free agent signings that they had last year, which were few and far between, he was the best one. So, I mean, I understand why you're having so many funerals for him, because he was the best outside signing of the 2024 offseason.
All right. I got, for Curtis Samuel, I wrote down 3 words. Said, not great, Bob. Those are my notes right now. Not great, Bob. Again, maybe he changes the course of his trajectory and his contract this year in year 2. But year 1, considering what they paid and what I think the expectations were, which I find really funny. All this Elijah Moore talk, and I like Elijah Moore, so I don't think it's ridiculous to say that he could be really good, in part because he's played with some really shitty quarterbacks. I remember 12 months ago, we were saying the same damn thing about Curtis Samuel and all the bummy-ass quarterbacks he played with in Washington and Carolina, and he gets Josh Allen, and yeah, he was hurt, and it definitely slowed down with the foot, especially early in the year, but like I said, not great, Bob.
2 touchdowns and 6 catches in the playoffs. He elevated his game when it mattered most.
He did. You're right. I said that to Joe from Queens, and he killed me.
It could also be an indicator that maybe 2025 is going to be a good year for him. Who knows? I don't know.
It could. I hope so. I really do, man. Taron Johnson also, I forgot that he got an extension last year. I think it was a top paid slot corner at the time.
Briefly. Yeah. I think the Colts signed their guy a week later. So it was short lived.
I'll say this too. And in fairness to him, injuries absolutely played a role. He was okay last year. He was not the Johnson that we've seen in years past. That was arguably the best slot corner in the entire NFL. He wasn't bad. He was okay by his standards last year. But again, the torn labrum, which we didn't even, God, he played in that Kansas City game with a torn labrum. He played in that game. He was on IR early in the year, friendly fire, I believe it was with Taylor Rapp. So injuries were certainly a factor for him. It's still a good move. How do you not extend him if you get the opportunity?
Mm-hmm. And for him, it could be, we have heard some rumblings about the Bills moving to more of the 3 linebacker sets. And so that could be a means to an end to keep Taron Johnson on the field and not maybe put him in so many run stop situations.
They redid Josh Allen's deal, which we really don't need to talk about today. They moved some money into the future, and then he ends up getting a brand new contract this offseason anyway. So that was kind of the bigger deal. I get what they did and why they did it. It's about the draft. All right, so Keon Coleman, Ray Davis, Dwayne Carter, who the hell's the guy I'm missing? Dwayne Carter. Oh, Cole Bishop, yeah. Cole Bishop, second round. I think Cole Bishop's the true to-be-determined guy. I still have I kind of feel like I know how I feel about Keon Coleman. I have no earthly idea how I feel about Cole Bishop. Cole Bishop can become a stud. I also think Cole Bishop can become a complete and utter bust, depending on some factors. But anyway, looking back now at the draft, again, draft is a little different in veterans because you still need time. I got to say one thing. And says, look, I'm already going to get shit on for a lot of things I've said on this podcast anyway. So I may as well add one more thing here before we're done for the day. God, I wish the Bills, and I'm sure the Bills wish they could go back in time and forget about Xavier Worthy. Forget about not making the trade. You make that trade anyway. You make the second trade. But man, oh man, if the Bills could go get them a Lamb McConkey instead of Keon Coleman right now, holy shit, would that be a nice addition. I feel good enough after 1 year of saying Keon Coleman might work out and might become something pretty nice with the Bills, maybe something more than just pretty nice. But I'm really confident in saying if Lamb McConkey was a Buffalo Bill right now, they might be having their next Stephon Diggs, ain't it?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that would rather have Lamb McConkey, including me. I mean, he played really, really great in that first NFL season out in Los Angeles.
Yeah, he's really good. Anyway, last one, and I think, and you wrote this, and I agree with it 100%, that this is probably the best, not probably, this was their best move. They extended Spencer Brown last year, and I also remember going back to last year and having conversations, and it felt kind of risky. It's like, you're taking a chance here because, this guy's only had like one good year, and you're going to pay him some good money. Who knows? It felt risky, but if he looks really good, you're saving yourself at least a couple million per year instead of him hitting the open market. Well, he was more than just pretty good. I think he's one of now the best right tackles in football. And man, this looks like an incredible extension. One that even though he's still making a lot of money is kind of sort of already feeling like a bargain.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. He's, he's way down the list as far as average salary goes at 18 million. So, if he keeps playing at this level, I was a little surprised he didn't get like more like the Pro Bowl talk last year. I can't imagine he won't get more of it this year.
Yeah, I agree 100%. What a beast he's become. And, it's hard to just, Brandon Beane, when you look at these last 2 years, he's really identified this core and done an incredible job of locking them up. There's not a lot of good players, young good players that leave Buffalo. Tremaine Edmonds did because of what he got in Chicago. I think they wanted to keep Gabe Davis, but not for what he got with Jacksonville, which obviously that didn't work out for him. But by and large, the Bills have really identified who's worth the money and kept them. That's why I got some confidence at the end of the day with James Cook. You know what I mean? With the Bills, what they decide to do, how they decide to pursue James Cook. I have some confidence that they're going to make the right decision. Kind of ditto with Connor McGovern, too, who could be in line for an extension. What's what?
You said you're confident they're going to make the right decision. What's the right decision?
What would I want? Let's end it by saying this. All this James Cook talk and shit, what I would do, what I would want is to find a way, if you could get him to come down even just a little bit, because I don't think he's quite worth what he wants, but I also think he's a hell of a lot more valuable than the average Bills fan who maybe is just, they're putting up a wall around them right now, and they're just shielding themselves from what they feel like is going to be the inevitable. Whether it's this summer if he gets traded or next year when he walks, that he's going to be gone. And when you know somebody's going to leave you, it's like if you're in a relationship and you know that girl's just going to dump you soon, you can just feel it in your bones. You start to put that wall up and you brace yourself and you find the shitty things about that girl that's going to make you feel better once ultimately you guys break up. I think the average Bills fan feels that way about James Cook. I think he's a hell of a lot better than that. Again, I said this earlier in the show, kind of passionately. I think this offense is significantly better, and you got a quarterback in his prime. Why do you want to keep messing around every year and letting the best player go? Stephon Diggs the year before, it worked. I get it. He was also a problem in the locker room. James Cook, you want to mess around 2 straight years and let what I think is your best skilled player on your team that's not named Josh Allen go back-to-back years? I don't want to mess around like that, dude. I think he's a difference maker. I went and I watched some of those touchdowns that he had, like that touchdown in the snow against Frisco, that long touchdown against Miami, man, he finds that hole, he finds that seam, and he gets into another gear. And it don't even look like he's running hard. He's like a horse that's just kind of gliding. It's fun to watch, man. He's a good player. He hits the holes. He improved statistically, he didn't, other than the touchdowns. He didn't really improve statistically besides that much last year from the year before, but just the way he ran, the yards after contact, the way he was delivering the blows, not fumbling the ball. He didn't really have critical back-breaking drops like he did 2 years ago. I still think he's an ascending player. I'm being long-winded as hell right here. I would pay his ass. All right? If I could get him to somewhere between 12 to 14 million, or maybe even a higher cap-looking number, but it's more upfront money, but with void years, you get what I'm saying. You could make it look like you're really appeasing him on paper when you first see the contract. Oh, James Cook got 15 million. Well, not really. It's more like 2 years, 22 or something like that. I could see something like that. I would pay him.
It's interesting that you said that number because that's what Jeremy White put out this morning. He said 3 years, 33 million, so $11 million per season. And then you look at the wide receivers that are making $11 million a year. It's like Jacoby Myers, Alan Lazard. I would rather have James Cook over those guys for sure. Like Josh Palmer's making, whatever it is, like just under 10 million, I think, a season. So you want to say that, yeah, James Cook is going to represent a much, much better return on investment than Josh Palmer is. But like, if you get up into that 12, 13, $14 million a year, like, I mean, the best way I can put it is like, would you rather have Khalil Shakir or James Cook? Because Shakir, 13.3 million, that's kind of around the number we're just talking about with James Cook. Which one of those two guys would you rather have? The Bills chose. Which one would you rather have?
You could make a fair case that if you pay James Cook, let's just say they do, if they were to pay him, and by the way, the Bills are not going to be in great cap shape next year. We know that too. All right. If you do pay James Cook, and this is a fair point, what you just said, does that mean you're not going to extend Connor McGovern? You let him walk? Does that mean you're not going to extend Osiris Torrance when the time is right because you can't afford to, because you also, paid another skill position player? It's certainly something to suggest. I'll tell you this though: 3 years, $33 million. If that's Jeremy's number, I'm paying that. I'm paying him.
Yeah, it's a very tempting number.
It is, and also, I don't think James Cook's going to take 3 years, $33 million. Not right now, anyway. Not right now. Maybe come next March, and the market's not what he thought it would be, because that does happen sometimes. These guys get to the market, especially it seems to happen a lot with receivers. It's like, well, I thought I was going to get more money, and then they sit around for a while, and they don't get it. That's a possibility too, but I wouldn't take that money if I was James Cook right now. That said, if I'm the Bills, again, maybe you inflate it to make it look a little bit better and you add some void years and shit like that. And I don't know. I'd love for this to be done because, like I said, my closing point here is the only thing besides injuries that scares me about the 2025 Buffalo Bills is distractions. Get rid of the distractions. HBO, you can't do nothing about, but you can make James Cook a non-distraction this summer, and I don't want to see it become a distraction. So, I don't know. It's tough. It's a never-ending saga. It's a drama. It's never-ending, dude. We can talk about this the next 4 weeks, probably. For an hour each day, too. But we're not. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this episode. Make sure you follow Matt on Twitter and also on Blue Sky at Matt Rich Warren. Of course, check out SB Nation. Don't shit on me too hard with the comments and the YouTube and the tweets that I'm going to get. Probably a couple emails, certainly a couple comments on my Facebook, things like that. I'm just being honest with you all today. And I know I had a lot of unpopular opinions, but it is what it is. Anyway, all right, so Sabres were yesterday, Bills today. Tomorrow, we'll talk a little bit of Bills camp. Maybe some news about what James Cook did or didn't do, but also going to have our Chicken Wing 2025 rankings and tiers. This is a couple months behind, long overdue. Tommy Seifert from the Buffalo Wing Coalition is going to be with me here, actually live in studio, and we're going to go down our list. So talk to you guys tomorrow.